Hello, fellow gamers. My name is Brent Justice. Welcome to the FPSreview.com's YouTube channel. AMD has delayed the Ryzen 9000 series. This is not new news. In fact, I'm several days late on reporting this. You may have already seen this news, seen all the details. There are other channels, other websites, other YouTube channels that have covered this in depth with very lengthy videos, really going over and explaining all the different possibilities for why there is a delay on the Ryzen 9000 series. So I don't want to go into a very long detail about that. It's already been done. The point of this video today is just to share the news if you haven't seen it yet, and to also provide kind of a newsy, podcasty type video to give you some background information on how we at the thefpsreview.com test CPUs and how our reviews will be handled, and basically how we do the testing. But let's quickly just go over and talk about the delay first. I'm also going to talk about some Intel news as well, and just kind of give a podcasty type of commentary on the instability with Intel CPUs as well, since that's relevant to all the testing that we and everyone else is doing right now when comparing all of these CPUs for these upcoming launches. So first of all, this is, like I said, kind of a free kind of format here that I'm doing today, kind of a news or podcasty type of format. And I just hope that you sit back, relax, and enjoy the listen, and hope you get something useful out of this information. And that's how I'm going to throw this. It's just off the cuff, completely off the cuff. So let's go to first the official news. I'm going to read the official email that press was sent with the Ryzen 9000 series delay. You've probably already heard this before, but I'll read it if you have not. AMD goes on to say, "We appreciate the excitement around Ryzen 9000 series processors. During final checks, we found the initial production units that were shipped to our channel partners did not meet our full quality expectations. Out of an abundance of caution and to maintain the highest quality experiences for every Ryzen user, we are working with our channel partners to replace the initial production units with fresh units. As a result, there will be a short delay in retail availability. The Ryzen 7 9700X and Ryzen 5 9600X processors will now go on sale August 8th, and the Ryzen 9 9950X and Ryzen 9 9900X processors will go on sale August 15th. We pride ourselves in providing a high-quality experience for every Ryzen user, and we look forward to our fans having a great experience with the new Ryzen 9000 series." So you can also check out this news on our website. We posted a news article about this. There's the new dates. Thursday, August 8th for the Ryzen 7 9700X, Ryzen 5 9600X. That's the on-shelf date. And then Thursday, August 15th for the Ryzen 9 9950X and Ryzen 9 9900X. Now a staggered launch, whereas previously these were all going to be released on the 31st, all four CPUs on the 31st, and now they've been pushed back a couple of weeks and staggered between 2 and 2. I think this is a great approach. In fact, I believe this is how it should have been in the first place, a staggered launch. Much better to release 2 and then the other 2 a week later after, instead of all 4 at once. It gives people time to figure out what CPU is best for you, but also these are a different class of CPUs. The Ryzen 7 and 5 are a different class than the Ryzen 9 CPUs, so somebody looking to purchase those are different than those, and things can kind of get muddied and confused if everything is all at once. So this staggered launch is actually better for not just the consumer buying the product, but also us, the reviewer, and giving us more time to really hone in on the features and the performance that are specific to these segments of CPUs. So that's important, and I'm actually fine with that. This is also not a long delay. A couple of weeks, not bad. If it was months, if they said, it was going to be 3 months later, oh yeah, okay, then you can start complaining. Couple of weeks, nothing to worry about there. So here again are just some quick specs on the CPUs here. If you are not familiar with them, this is what's coming on those on-shelf dates now August 8th and now August 15th. And I'm looking forward to it. Now, we can talk all day about theories and reasons for why. There's a lot out there, and we don't really have any solid information from AMD on what the delay or why the delay was caused. There's a lot of theories. And I'm not going to say what's right or wrong because I don't know. But, some of the theories could be the packaging. Maybe there was a rumor or a theory about the I/O die. I have no idea if any of that's true. And it's really hard to speculate on those type of things. But it could be just something as simple as the actual packaging, like the retail packaging or something they needed to change. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows what it was? But according to AMD, it's minor. It's not a major issue. It's not something that was going to cause a performance difference. So it's fine. It's fine, and there's nothing to freak out about with this launch. Again, other YouTube channels and websites have covered this incredibly in depth, so I will leave it to them, and you can go watch all those other channels. Search for it on YouTube, search for it on Google. You'll find all that coverage from the popular YouTubers out there, and there'll be a lot more information. So definitely do that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to these CPUs. I'm looking forward to getting them on our test bench and seeing how they perform. Hopefully we will get samples. Hopefully we will have reviews up on the embargo dates, whenever that is, and looking forward to it. And I do want to talk about how we test CPUs because that's going to be important for this launch and, of course, all other CPU launches going forward. We have been testing CPUs for a while here on the thefpsreview.com. We did the Zen 3 launch. We did a couple of the Intel launches, the 12th gen and 13th gen. So we're no stranger to this type of thing, and we do have a format that we use and a reason for why we choose the tests that we do. I want to go into all of that, but first let's quickly talk about the Intel fixes, updates that are coming, the instability issues. Obviously, a big problem for Intel, a big problem for everybody, a big problem for consumers who have purchased these CPUs and are worried about, is my CPU degraded, are worried about, should I spend money and buy that CPU? Am I going to get a CPU that's going to degrade over time? All very, relevant concerns and issues, and this is a major problem for everyone. Purchasers of the CPUs, game developers who have been running servers on these CPUs and have spent a lot of money and resources into it. It's just a huge problem. I'm not going to go into all of that because, again, other channels have really covered this really well. What we know is that there will be a microcode fix coming mid-August, hopefully, although they said there would be answers coming at the end of May, and that never happened. So hopefully there will be a microcode fix. Now, the problem with the microcode fix is if your CPU is already degraded, that's not going to fix your CPU. If it already has degradation and you are already experiencing problems with it, this won't fix that. This will basically just prevent problems on a CPU that doesn't already have problems. It will make sure that these degradation issues are not created in the first place. But if you already have issues, this isn't going to fix it. So that's a big problem. But the best we can say to do is just, keep updating the BIOS on your motherboard. Make sure you use the Intel default presets and profiles. Make sure that when this microcode fix comes out, you get that update absolutely as quickly as possible, and hope for the best. And that's kind of a sucky situation to be in, to say, is just kind of a hope for the best kind of situation with your CPU. And it sucks that we have to be in that situation right now, but that's where we are. Now, as far as the reviewers and what we can do, all I can do as a reviewer is test what is available. And right now, I can test with the latest BIOS on a Z790 motherboard. We're going to use a motherboard that's from Asus, and I have the latest BIOS. It has an SVID fix, in it, but of course not the microcode fix. It has the Intel defaults or Intel failsafes for the SVID, and then the Intel profiles for extreme and performance. And that's all I can test with for this launch review on Zen 5, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, when a microcode fix comes out in mid-August, will that change performance on the 14900K? Who knows, right? But I don't have that now, so I can't use it now. When that comes, I guess there will be a lot of retesting to do to find out if that changes performance or not. But right now, all I can use is what's available. So I'm going to actually show you the the BIOS that we'll be using for our 14900K comparisons. Just straight up, being completely transparent with you. Here's the here's the BIOS. This is the default settings. This is when you load optimized defaults on the BIOS. This is what shows up on the Asus Z790 motherboard that we are using, which is a Z790 Pro Wi-Fi. So it's the Asus TUF. Yeah, Asus TUF Gaming Z790 Pro Wi-Fi. This is the latest BIOS at the time. You can see the date there, 7/25, so literally as of my recording yesterday. Latest BIOS, and you can see here that the Intel default settings is the performance preferences. If you click down on that, you'll get an Asus overclock option, which will enable basically the highest power levels for PL1 and PL2, but with Intel default, it locks PL1 and PL2 to 253 watts. Now, under the Intel default settings, the Extreme is currently the default that it has on the motherboard. You can alternatively select a performance mode, but all that does is change the amps of the CPU. So it's different between the Extreme and the Profile in that, but both PL1 and PL2 are still locked to 253 watts on Extreme or Performance. And then you'll also notice the Asus multi-core enhancements are disabled in the Intel default settings, and SVID behavior is Intel's failsafe. So these are the default properties. You can see the RAM we're using. We set it to XMP1, so it's DDR5 7200. But otherwise, these are the default settings. That's what we're going to test at. We're also going to test at the performance profile. So we are going to test at the two profiles that are available in this BIOS. And all we have is Extreme and Performance. In the future, may there be more when the microcode fix comes? Perhaps. There is also possibly a standard or a default, but those options are not available with this BIOS. They're just not there. All we have is Extreme and Performance, so all we can do is test those on the 14900K. So that's it. That's what we can do for our testing. When the microcode fix comes, we can check that out and see how it works, but these are the settings we're going to use. I just wanted to be very transparent about that in any upcoming CPU reviews. I think that's going to be important. So now that we've talked about what we're going to test on the Intel platform, let's talk about how we do CPU reviews, and that's really the meat of this video today. Again, a very podcasty news kind of video today, very free rolling here, right off the cuff. Here's how we test reviews, or CPU reviews. We do two sections. We look at basically synthetic and productivity, and then gaming. So we want to cover both because obviously a CPU is used for gaming, and that's huge. That's what most of our audience is going to be looking at, is the gaming performance. But it's not the only reason you buy a CPU. You also want it to do everything else on your computer, right? And that depends on what kind of user you are. If you are a content creator, that's different. If you are, you do 3D rendering, that's different. If you do just office type work, Excel and Word, that's different. If you do a lot of like web work just off of like Chrome, well, that's different. If you do all these different things, that can depend what type of CPU you need for your needs. So we want to cover as much as we can to give you an idea of the performance. And for that, we do start with synthetic benchmarks because that is a function of reviewing performance and figuring out which CPU is best for what type or task of workload. And that's important. So we do test synthetic benchmarks, and that means the Cinebench, that means the Geekbench, the PC Mark, IDA64. All of these we use to give us an idea of, in certain workloads, how these things perform, because some of these stress single core workloads more. Some of these stress multi-core workloads more. Some of these stress other functions, maybe like AVX 512. Some of these stress lighter workloads like Office. And then some of these stress, rendering workloads like Blender. We do use Blender as well. And we also do transcoding. We do some transcoding and Handbrake and report the time it takes the CPU to transcode a video. A content creator on YouTube would use that function of the CPU. So these are all important, and synthetic tests and benchmarks can show us how those features of CPUs perform and compare. So that is one thing we do. We include all of that because it's important for those type of workloads and to hone in on which CPU is best for what type of workload. So that's what we do. And we do the synthetic or system benchmarks. We kind of subcategorize it, synthetic and system benchmarks first. Then we do rendering benchmarks. So Blender, Cinebench, V-Ray, all of these, and Handbrake, all of these are like rendering type of workloads that a content creator would use. So that's another subsection of that synthetic testing, but it's also real world because Handbrake is something you use in the real world. Blender is something you use in the real world. So these are still real world results and matter to people buying a CPU. So that shows single, multi-core, different type of workloads for productivity and content creation and that type of thing. So our CPU reviews have that information. Second to that, the next largest topic is obviously gaming. We test as many games as we can get, of course. In our reviews, we tend to go between maybe 6 to 8 games in our initial launch review for a CPU review. In the future, sometimes we have big roundups where we'll do like a 20 game roundup of performance on a CPU, and you may see that in the future as well from these new CPUs, so stay tuned. But we do as many as we can. Now, one thing that we do unique that you may not see from others is we test at all 3 resolutions, 4K, 1440p, and 1080p. Now, let's talk a little bit about that because there's a lot of controversy over reviewers that only test 1080p or do not test 4K and the usefulness of that. 1080p is the best resolution to test CPU performance for gaming at. The reason why, and you may have heard this before, is because it's all about how fast your CPU can deliver frames for your GPU. So if you test at 4K, you are GPU bound and you are no longer able to see how fast the CPU can push frames to the GPU. So that doesn't tell you how a 5600X compares, or a 5700X, those lower end, AM4 CPUs would compare to like a 7800X 3D. That wouldn't tell you that because you are totally GPU bound. However, as a gamer, that's a real world resolution that a gamer would play a game at. So I see it both ways. I see it that you need to test all of it. My opinion, our opinion, is that we need to test all 3 resolutions because we need to show how fast the CPUs actually are. And to do that, you test at 1080p so that you can see, with a very fast GPU, of course, a 4090, to see how many frames each CPU can push to see, therefore, in future games, future video cards that are even faster, which CPU would start scaling better between each one. And so it's absolutely important and necessary that we test at 1080p. So that's a given. 1080p is like the first thing that I do. But then I also look at it from a real world perspective that a gamer who has a 4090 or is buying a 9950X is going to have a high-end GPU, and they're not going to be playing at 1080p. They're going to be playing at 1440p or 4K. So it's also important to include those resolutions for that metric. Now, at 4K, yeah, all the numbers are going to be the same probably. However, I have seen some games where there's a little bit of a difference still, even at 4K, believe that or not. But where I'm really starting to see more differences these days, especially with fast GPUs like a 4090, is in 1440p. In past CPU testing I've done, there have been games that do show performance difference between CPUs at 1440p. That's becoming a resolution where you're starting to see the CPU make more of a difference. And there's also another aspect of CPU performance with GPUs you need to be aware of. Things like turning on upscaling with FSR or DLSS. Well, that causes more strain on your CPU because you are rendering up from a lower resolution. Your render resolution is lower. So yeah, you may be playing at a resolution of 1440p, but you're rendering from a 1080p resolution, which means, oh, now all of a sudden you're more CPU bound than GPU bound, or at that resolution you're more CPU bound than you were before. Not exactly 100%, but more than you were. So if you're playing at 4K and you turn on, quality DLSS FSR, now you're rendering up from like 1440p. So a little more CPU dependent. And if you used balanced FSR DLSS, even lower, you could be rendering up from 1080p. So the use of upscaling creates a higher burden on the CPU. So yeah, that's important because you need to know how that's going to perform when you use features like DLSS and FSR. Also, a new thing in the mix here is frame generation, FSR frame generation or DLSS frame generation. Frame generation uses more CPU cycles. It takes more work from the CPU to do that. So that's another thing that's important. You will want a fast CPU if you're going to use a lot of frame generation. And third, don't forget ray tracing. People don't realize this, but ray tracing adds more workload to the CPU as well. So now, let's just take for instance, you're playing a game and you're using FSR DLSS upscaling, you're using frame generation, and you have ray tracing enabled. All of a sudden, you have now increased those workloads 3 times to your CPU. Your CPU now does need to be faster, even though you are using all of those features to make the performance faster. You're making your CPU work harder. And that's why it's real important to test all of those resolutions really and take all these things into consideration when testing CPU performance. So our method and our idea and our goal behind testing CPUs is simple. Provide as much data for you, the gamer, the reader, to take that information and make the best decision for yourself. And the only way I can do that is to provide all the data. 1080p is going to be the most important, so that's a given. But why not also include 1440p and 4K in there? Why not? If I do that, I've covered all my bases and given you all the information you need to make a purchasing decision about high-end CPUs and GPUs and all of that. It's relevant and it's important, and it helps you make a better buying decision for yourself with this hardware. And that's all that we are about. We provide the data. You determine for yourself how that's relevant to you and what is important to you in gaming, and therefore what hardware would be better for you to buy. And that's where I'll end this video, is just to actually 2 more things. I feel that the job of a reviewer, or the job of me, the job that I am doing on our website, on our YouTube channel, is to give you, the reader, the buyer, the consumer, all of the information that I can, all of the information that I have the ability and the resources and the time to do, so that you can make a better buying decision. It's not my job to tell you what's important to you. It's not my job to tell you what data is important to you. It's not my job to tell you, even sometimes, what is better or best. Like, I can give you my opinion, sure. I can tell you what I think from my experiences and my values and what's important to me, and I can tell you, how this data can be translated, how this data can be taken, all the different viewpoints of the data. I can tell you all of that information. But at the end of the day, your values and what you value may be different than what I value. Therefore, it is just the best thing to give you all the information and data that I can provide, put it out there almost like an info dump, like a factual, objective info dump. Here's the info, here's the data, here's our testing, here's our experiences. Take that, read it, understand it, and now you, the consumer, decide what is best for you. Like somebody may say 60 FPS in Alan Wake 2 at 4K is fine for them and they enjoy that. Someone else might say, no, that's not for me. I need 120 FPS in Alan Wake 2 at 4K. Now, neither one is wrong or right. It's just personal preference. One person likes A, the other person likes B. So who am I to say that A is right and wrong or B is right and wrong? Well, I'm not. However, what I can do is show you A and B and say, look, here's what you get with A, here's what you get with B. Now you decide, do you like A, do you like B? If you like A, maybe this is the card for you. If you like B or CPU, if you like B, maybe this is the card or CPU for you. And that's it. So we put out the data, we objectively put the data out there, give you as much data as we can, much information, much testing as we can with our resources that we have, and then you decide what that means to you and what's important to you and what conclusions you want to make out of that. And so that's where we come out with all of our reviews, and I can make a whole video about that because I think it's a good way to handle things. But I'm kind of blabbering now. Talking about our CPU reviews, that's what we're going to do in our gaming benchmarks that you'll find, 4K, 1440p, 1080p. We're just going to test all three resolutions. All the cards are out there on the table that way, and you can see for yourself what matters to you in what settings. Obviously, you will want to focus on the 1080p results because that's really going to tell you how the CPUs scale between each other. But all the data will be there anyway. I hope to do a bigger game kind of review with the CPUs in the future as well and do like a 20 game kind of roundup thing. So that should be fun. I look forward to doing that. And the last thing I want to end on is we definitely encourage and emphasize that you watch, read, listen to as many reviews as you can. Don't take our word as gospel. In fact, read other review websites of these CPUs. Watch other YouTube channels of these CPUs. Listen to other podcasts about these CPUs. Take all of that information in and discern for yourself what's important to you, because at the end of the day, how a reviewer sets up their hardware, how a reviewer chooses the benchmarks and games they're going to run, and the settings they're going to use, and the comparisons they're going to use, and the configuration of their computer system, RAM, everything, that is going to influence and change the conclusion that a reviewer will come to in the conclusion. One reviewer may come to a different conclusion than another reviewer just based on the configuration and setup that they have done for that review. Therefore, it's important for you, the reader, to see, first of all, how everything is set up. Make sure you always check those review test setup pages. Extremely important. Figure out how the reviewer set up their review and how the configuration is for their systems and the games and the settings and everything. And then read their conclusion and figure out how they came to those conclusions and what they are concluding off the data. And then go read other websites. Read several, right? And take all of that information that you've gathered from all of that and come to your own conclusion. So don't take our word as gospel. Go read other websites. But definitely check our review out too. I mean, it's going to be part of the greater story of the performance and how these things compare. And there is a greater story. You take all of that information from all of these different sources and you'll see the bigger picture then. So that's the important part. And that's what I want to mention is I think that's the best way to handle it from a consumer perspective. If you're looking for what CPU is best and how these compare, then you want to read multiple websites and YouTube channels and take all that information in, and don't just watch one and say that's the de facto answer, because for you it may or may not be, and for someone else it may or may not be. Remember, what you think may be important is not necessarily important to somebody else. So just keep that in mind. But that's how we are going to test the Zen 5 CPUs coming up, and all our comparisons and all CPU launches going forward. Again, we have done several launches and CPU reviews on our website, www.thefpsreview.com. Go to the reviews and CPUs section. You'll see AMD CPUs and Intel CPUs. We have all the Zen 4 CPUs reviewed, all the Zen 3 CPUs reviewed, all the 14th gen Intel CPUs and 13th gen and 12th gen Intel CPUs. All of that's on our website, and we will continue to hit all of these CPUs as much as we can in the future. And in our initial reviews, again, we cover the synthetic productivity and content creation stuff first, and then we go heavily into gaming. We'll do gaming in the initial launch, and then hopefully we'll be able to hit some really big like game roundup type of deals with these CPUs and do a whole lot more focusing on game performance even more in the future. And always remember, what you see initially is not the end-all be-all of the reviews. There is usually follow-ups and other content to follow where we focus and hone in more on specific things on all these performances. So just keep all that in mind. There will be more to come and more to share. I'm looking forward to it. This is, I think this is an exciting launch. I mean, a new launch always is, but this is exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Hope you all are as well. Again, I tried a little bit of a different format here in this video. This is kind of a podcasty type of video, kind of a news or podcast type of video, something we haven't really done on our YouTube channel. We're trying to build it up and do some new things here on the channel. Drop a comment and let me know what you think of this kind of free-flowing format. And I look forward to hearing all your feedback and comments on that. But those are my thoughts. Again, hope you all enjoy what we have coming for you. Stay tuned to our website, www.thefpsreview.com, and this YouTube channel in the future for even more content. Like this video if you like it. Consider subscribing to this channel if you want to see more. We do plan to get a whole bunch more out. We're working on it. We're trying. So thank you all for watching, and have a very blessed day, and stay tuned for the next one.